If there is to be a mistake on the street there where officer meets citizen, should the burden of the mistake, if it is a lethal one, fall upon the officer, or should it fall upon the citizen? That is the question behind the call for police reform around the country. Calls often made by people on the left and not made by people who call themselves conservatives or on the right or Republican. Now, this is an interesting problem because the so-called right, the so-called conservative, says he is for liberty. He says he's for the Constitution. And very, very few times do we see any sense that policing needs to be overturned entirely as the republic progresses, or that's how they see it. They see progress and regaining the republic and so on. We know, of course, that we are in a long unwinding of the republic and a devolution of the United States. Lord willing, the country will be broken up into other countries in the next century, or, well, maybe over this century. And there is not in the rank of the conservative movement, the Republican Party, there is not the sense of danger from the state itself, as we see evidenced frequently in police actions against innocent people who do not deserve the death penalty. And yet they receive the death penalty summarily, extrajudicially, in a statutorily permitted way all across the country, even here in Southeast Tennessee, even here in the Chattanooga area. I'm thinking of the execution by East Ridge Officer McPherson of the plumber in front of his house. And I'm thinking also of a man slain a couple years ago whose death is a cause célèbre on the Concerned Citizens for Justice website. There's a page about Javerio Eagle, the young father who was gunned down in a hail of bullets. He had a weapon. It was pretended that he was going to hurt his daughter, that he was having an episode of some kind, and with a weapon, he clearly was a danger to his own child. And so he was hit many times, a dozen times or so, by a fusillade of bullets after the girl had been jerked out of his presence by a crafty officer hiding behind a tree, I think. And down he went. And even as he lay dying in the grass there at the government slum, he was handcuffed, handcuffed in your death agony by the police who are fearing for their lives. They're fearing perhaps maybe you have a submachine gun under your T-shirt, and as you're lying there groaning, you may suddenly whip it out and fire a full burst on automatic, gunning down innocent officers who are serving the public. This is David Tulis, and that is a question here on Nooga Radio as we ask ourselves and ask you, my listener, about the prospects for reform in Chattanooga police reform, where there is accountability, where there is a respect for every human being made in God's image. Every human being is made in God's image, even if you think that person is a low-life black on the street, right? You're an officer, and here you are encountering one more vagrant, right? One more vagrant, one more worthless black person on the street, and you need to check him out. You need to manhandle him a little bit and show him who's in authority. Of course, that's you. Now, the question I ask is, how is it that you, the officer, came into that position? How is it that you have turned away from your initial goals in joining the police department? The young cadets who come have a high view of the work of officer, of the work of cop. Of course, a cop is simply short for citizen on patrol. There has been, over the course of 150 years or so in this city anyway, a professionalization of the policing function into a state function. No longer are cops citizens. They are a sort of extra-legal parallel society, a very hidden society closed off to the outside world, in which it's us against them. That is a routine part of the training that you get as the officer. And you're told every day repeatedly, do it so that you get to go home tonight to your wife and children if you haven't already had a divorce. You can go home to your wife and children, and so do everything you can to maintain your personal safety. That is the mantra. It is drilled into the officer over and over again in the training and in the morning coffee call, the morning roundup of whom to look for and what to be aware of on the street. That is part of the mantra of being the officer. And what happens in that transformation of the young cadet who's training, who enters the police department, becoming an officer, his ideals are changed. They are changed. They are in a way disabused, especially when his experiences or her experiences tend to show the low and hard part of humankind, the rugged, the hurt, the injured, the angry, the thoughtless, the criminal, and so one's perspective of humanity, if unaided by Christian teachings, I would say, tends to reduce the respect one might have for the average person that one encounters. Right, one comes to not respect the average person in your heart. You come to look at that person as a potential enemy, a potential threat. And if you approach that person, you're aware that he is entering your kill zone, right? And so you are always ready to open fire at the first sign that he's reaching for his wallet, or the first sign that he's reaching for something that you can't identify, or he's reaching behind something, the object that he's reaching for you cannot see. And so you are ready to open fire and to kill that man or that woman made in God's image who has not done anything worthy of death. Right? The people who are killed by officers have rarely done anything worthy of death. And remember, the death penalty is to be carefully wrought by the government, right? By the magistrate, the king, if you will, the man in authority, the one in our country who has the power of the sword, right? The lawful use of the sword. Christianity calls that the ministry of the sword. The sword is indeed a ministry, and what it does, it brings about. It allows good by extinguishing evil. That is the purpose of it. That is why there is the judge. The judge is there to extinguish the evil, those people and those customs and those habits and those liberties which are in fact evil and destructive. He is there to oppress that party. And he's there to protect the good, right? He's there to protect the innocent and protect their property and their persons. That's the role of the judge. In biblical teaching, the government is effectively the judge, and he is in charge of executing all capital criminals and imposing restitution on those who have done nothing worthy of death, but who have done a wrong, right? Who've done a crime or some act of neglect. Now, the question here now is about the mistake. Where is the burden of proof going to shift when there is a mistake? Should it shift in favor of the officer, or should it shift in favor of the citizen? The officer who joins the police department thinks initially that he is there and he is willing to make that sacrifice. He's willing to make a sacrifice of his own life to protect the innocent, right? And in the modern parlance, he is there to provide security. Now, security is really not something that one should expect of the officer unless one wants a tyranny. And I'm afraid most conservatives want tyranny. They invite tyranny. They expect it. They're thankful for it. Most conservatives, probably most Republicans of the Gerald McCormick type, actually want tyranny. They like it. It's essential. They feel good that it's there. They're willing to put up with it because, after all, the officer is there to provide security. That kind of thinking has infected everyone. Even Demetrius Coonrod, the city councilwoman, has that idea that she was elected to provide security for the people, when in fact she was simply elected to provide representation. The idea that the cop provides security is widespread. So the man who joins the police department has a high noble goal in joining, and yet he's by training made to think that it's the citizen's life for his, right? And so if there's a mistake to be made, where's the blood going to be shed? Well, it's going to be shed by the innocent civilian who in the mistake, right? If there's a mistake in an encounter, some kind of conversation, some kind of call for help, here the woman says that there seems to be some kind of sexual assault near her, and she calls police, and she ends up getting a fatal bullet shot by an officer named Noor in the stomach. And how, why do mistakes end in the shedding of innocent blood that is civilian and not police? I think, my listener, you are willing that the officer survive the mistake and that the citizen at the hand of the officer lie dead. You're willing to accept that because you believe in policing. You are a cop lover. You believe you're a lover of police. You think that the police are God's gift to mankind. And yet, I think as we're seeing these executions, that we need to reconsider this theory, this part of American life, the American way, in which there are about 1,000 civilian deaths at the hands of police every year. In 3 years' time, that's as many people as died in the World Trade Center, which is blamed on Muslim terrorists, but which we want to make sure we don't ascribe entirely to the Saudi Wahhabi Muslim activist jihadist world. There was in those operations great cooperation by the good people. The good people, I would like to suggest, were a part of that operation and received great benefits, especially real estate redevelopment prospects and a $14 billion payout to the lessor of those towers. More likely to be killed by an officer than by a terrorist. At least 7 times more likely. I've seen various figures calculating the risk to you, my listener. John Whitehead, whom you read sometimes at Nooganomics.com, proposes it's about 5%. This is David Tulis, 800-8949, 800-8949. So if a mistake is made, I would like to suggest, and someone is accidentally slain, which is it to be, a slain officer or a slain citizen? Now, the officer says it's not going to be me. And so he is going to fear for his life easily, and he's going to have great actions of self-protection and lashing out with bullet, taser, club, and other weapons at the person he believes, of course mistakenly, is going to kill him. The mistake is not going to be lethal to him. If there is a mistake, it will be lethal to the other side. That would be the citizen. And we don't have enough reform thinking here in Chattanooga. And I know that that's true because even the progressive left, which makes many mistakes in its analysis, and uses and has many, I would say, misemphases in its analysis, even the left is not going far enough. Now, I say that in light of the stories yesterday in the local press from Concerned Citizens of Justice. We also have the NAACP in Hamilton County, Dr. Eleanor Woods, making comments about the candidates. Her group favored the selection by Mayor Andy Burke of Edwin McPherson, who is on the force. Also on the Chattanooga force is a man named David Roddy, who is a military man. He is a military man, and the last time I saw him in person, it was before the city council, and he was thanking the council for armor plate, maybe for police dogs, but maybe for the men and women of his military garrison, which is maybe about 480 officers, nearly 500 sworn officers who are military people. Right? These are military people who have automatic rifles, who have armor plate on their persons, who have CS gas, which is CS gas or other gases on them, some of which are termed terrorist instruments in the terrorism statute of 2003, and who wear bandoliers of ammunition, often 16-round clips of 40 caliber or 9mm ammunition, as if they were ready for warfare, as if there is a war pending that we need to defend against. There is, in this whole David Roddy world, the military. And rightly so, the Concerned Citizens for Justice here in Chattanooga have made note of David Roddy. Now, they say one thing in in that group's press statement. There are 2 individuals who were quoted. The story that was in yesterday's Times Free Press clearly and oddly did not name any of the 2 people who are named in the website. Well, actually, it's a TV9's report about that group's complaint regarding. No, actually, it's TV3. TV3 again shining the way for TV media in Chattanooga with the best reporting and perhaps the most reliable reporting as well. Tanisha Cordell is the reporter, and she cites two people, and in fact has an interview with 2 of them, Jared Story and Aisha Pryor. Now, there are the regular annoying emphases of the progressive left. These are, the progressive left is pro-welfare state, pro-queer, pro-government control of many things. These are people who don't really appreciate liberty. Their perspective is not toward liberty and restraint of the state. They don't see that as a goal. That is not the goal of your standard progressives. And yet here on the question of police violence and the war, the effective war by the state against the people through policing, I believe they are leading the way. Policing is a kind of strip mining of the populace, and what it does, it draws to the surface fear. And in the mining down, in the drilling down into the surface, policing leaves that sense of helplessness and the lack of awareness among the citizenry of their rights. It is a kind of anesthesia about the rights of the people and a continuing drain on their confidence. And because we have a policing culture, especially in the poorer areas of town, that I believe is extraordinarily decapitalizing. I would like to suggest that some point worth exploring, perhaps by a UTC student working on a doctorate or a master's degree in criminal justice, there might be some way of evaluating the loss of capital, the loss of confidence that is potentially capital creating, potentially business creating in poorer neighborhoods that are subject to intense surveillance by the David Roddy style surveillance and aggressive enforcement by the police officers. There is in those places an impossibility that becomes present in the heart and mind of the people who live there, and that is that we can't do anything without government permission. Policing creates this sense of doubt. It creates the sense of fear, not fear necessarily of the marketplace, not fear of not having enough cash for your rollout of your new product, but those things are those hesitations in capitalism, those hesitations toward entrepreneurship come in the culture that is well policed. Okay, let's just say a well policed culture is a culture that does not have the courage, the risk taking courage that is required for capitalism. Policing is, as I say, it is a kind of strip mining, and what it draws to the surface is compliance and fear, and what it puts down in the way of shafts is the sense of helplessness. You can't do that. You can't say no. You can't defy the officer. You have to give your social security number to a cop. Why would anyone give a social security number to anybody? You know, first of all, social security numbers are voluntary. No one has to have them, so it's very unusual for officers to demand ID. You know, you can give ID by stating your name and your address. You don't have to give any more than that. To demand an intimate detail like that and to have it starting to circulate through the digital currents in the police department makes the person who gave that number, such as Mrs. Coonrod, extraordinarily vulnerable, such as Anthony Gladden, extraordinarily vulnerable to ID theft. That is something that those numbers, as those numbers get away from you, you are going to become the victim of Bulgarian entrepreneurs who care not for Western law, Western property rights, and your name and your number is going to be attached to a credit card application, and $4,000 is going to be run up in purchases on that card by you before the people who have done the good work have said, you know, we better drop that one. We're being sniffed out because it's not working anymore. The complaints by concerned citizens for justice are, I would say, they are sort of minor. For example, if you read the press statement from Concerned Citizens for Justice of a couple of days ago, there are complaints about the captain from LAPD. His name is Todd Chamberlain, and it is said that he condoned a racist culture by ignoring requests to file complaints against the officers who engaged in racist behavior. So in a way, that's a kind of a silly objection, if you ask me. He was even himself directly accused of stating at a public community relations meeting that he did not want officers hiding out at the 7-Eleven drinking watermelon Slurpees. And the phrase watermelon Slurpees created offense. So here, the fact that some people got offended at that, and that here in Chattanooga, this is noted as an objection to Captain Chamberlain, seems rather petty, right? It seems to be looking at something relatively minor. He was trying to be colorful, and that was just a flavor that dropped into his mind. That does not suggest inherent racism at all. It simply doesn't. Now, as far as Acting Chief David Roddy, we have here a single sentence in this press statement, which I think is very important. I think the progressives have an excellent point here, and it's this: finalist and acting chief Roddy has on many occasions been a vocal advocate of increased police funding for surveillance through purchase of body cameras, surveillance cameras, and other technology, as well as militarization of the police through purchase of assault weapons and body armor. Now, I don't have the details, and the details of these past acts are not given here, as they should be. These are details which are much more important than the time given in this statement to Captain Chamberlain. And this group wants something. It wants community control, and we have to say yes. The progressives on this point, all right, there needs to be community control over the mayor.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader, Nooga Radio.